Captain Li Wan stared at the blinking lights on his control panel aboard the Endeavour. This was humanity's first ship to travel beyond their solar system, and everything felt new and dangerous. The stars looked different out here, cold and distant. But something else was wrong. Strange sounds kept coming through their communication system. "Park, what is that noise?" he asked his communications officer. Park Minji had been working at her station for hours, her face getting more worried with each passing minute. Park Minji looked up from her screen. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Captain, these signals are not normal. They are not radio waves or computer messages. They feel alive somehow. Someone is crying for help, but not with words. With their feelings." Kim Do-yeon walked over to look at the data on her screen. He was the ship's expert on alien life, though he had never actually seen any aliens before. The patterns on the screen moved in waves, rising and falling like heartbeats. "These are not random signals," he said quietly. "Someone is sending these. On purpose. Many someones actually. From all over the galaxy." Li Huan felt his stomach twist. They had come out here to explore and make friends with other species, but these signals sounded like screams of pain. "Can you tell what they are saying?" Park Minji adjusted her equipment and put on her headphones. She listened for a long moment, then pulled them off quickly, her face pale. "Captain, it is horrible. They are begging for help. They are afraid. They are in pain. So much pain." Far across the galaxy, in the crystal cities of the Veltar, tall beings made of living crystal walked through their laboratories. Their bodies caught the light and threw rainbows on the walls, beautiful and cold. They worked on small furry creatures called the Cathara. The Cathara had large, sad eyes and could share their emotions with others through their minds. The crystal beings cut into the Cathara's heads while they were still awake. They needed the brain tissue to power their computers and machines. The Cathara sent out waves of terror and pain with their thoughts, screaming for someone to save them. The crystal beings did not care. To them, the Cathara were just things. To be used in another part of space, beings made of pure energy called the Luminari floated between the stars. They looked like dancing flames or flowing water made of light. They were beautiful, but they were hungry. They fed on the life force of entire planets. When they found a world full of living things, they would drain all the energy from every plant, animal, and person, until nothing was left but empty rock. The people on these worlds would feel their strength leaving them slowly. They would reach out with their minds, calling for help as they died. But the Luminari could not hear their cries. They only saw food. Even worse were the Kethva. They looked like giant insects with too many arms and eyes that glowed in the dark. But they shared one mind among all of them, like a hive of bees. When they found other intelligent species, they would capture them and force their minds into the hive. The captured beings would lose themselves forever, becoming just another part of the Kethva group mind. Entire civilizations had been swallowed this way. Billions of people had their thoughts taken away, their personalities erased. As it happened, they would scream with their minds, begging to stay themselves. But once they were part of the hive, they could not scream anymore. Back on the Endeavour, Dr. Kim worked through the night to understand the signals. He found patterns that made his blood run cold. "Captain, I think I know what is happening. These signals are coming from dozens of different species. They are all asking for help. They are all being hurt by someone stronger than them." Li Huan looked out at the stars and felt something change inside him. On Earth, when something cried for help in the darkness, other things came running. Sometimes it was help. Sometimes it was something worse looking for an easy meal. But something always came. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "Based on the signal patterns, thousands of years," Dr. Kim replied. "Maybe longer. These three big civilizations have been treating weaker species like animals, using them, eating them, stealing their minds." Park Minji was still listening to the signals. Tears ran down her face. "Captain, there are so many voices. Children, too. They are so scared." Li Huan made a decision that would change the galaxy. Forever. Send a message back to Earth. Tell them what we found. Tell them that someone needs to answer these calls for help. He looked out at the cold stars again. Somewhere out there, the strong were hurting the weak, and no one was stopping them. But humanity had just arrived in the galaxy. And humans had always been very good at hunting things that needed to be stopped. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when apex predators heard the cries of the innocent. For the first time in thousands of years, the screams in the darkness were about to be answered. 3 weeks after receiving the strange signals, the Endeavour found its first target. Captain Li Huan stood on the bridge watching a massive structure floating in space near a green and blue planet. The structure was made of crystal and metal, spinning slowly like a deadly flower. "That's a Veltar research station, Dr. Kim," Doyen said, reading the data from their scanners. "The planet below is the Cathara homeworld. Those are the creatures whose screams we heard." Officer Choi Seobin was monitoring the station's communications. Her face went white as she listened. "Captain, they are talking about today's harvest. They're going to take more brain tissue from the Cathara. They sound excited about it." Captain Lee felt his jaw clench. "Take us closer, but keep us hidden." Lieutenant Song Woon worked at his controls, using their ship's stealth systems to approach the station without being seen. "Sir, I'm picking up energy signatures from inside the station. There are hundreds of life forms in there. Most of them are very weak." What they saw through the station's windows made the entire crew fall silent. The crystal beings moved through bright white rooms, working on small, furry creatures strapped to metal tables. The Cathara had large eyes that showed their pain and fear. They were awake during the procedures, their heads cut open while the crystal beings removed pieces of their brains. "My God," whispered Engineer Yang Giwan. "They're torturing them." Officer Choi Seobin watched as crystal beings brought in smaller Cathara, barely more than children. Her hand moved to the weapon at her side without her thinking about it. "Captain, we have to do something. Those are children. We're just one ship," Lieutenant Song said from his station. "They have weapons we don't understand. Their technology is hundreds of years ahead of ours. Can't fight them." Dr. Kim was studying the station's operations through their scanners. His voice was cold and clinical. "I treat thinking beings like farm animals. The crystal beings, the energy creatures, the hive mind insects, they have all built their civilizations on slavery and murder. They are not advanced. They're just very good at hurting those weaker than themselves." Captain Lee stared at the station and felt something change inside him. All his life he had dreamed of meeting aliens and making friends with them. He had imagined sharing knowledge and exploring the stars together. But this was not friendship. This was a slaughterhouse, sir. Officer Choi asked, "What are your orders?" Captain Lee thought about Earth, about the animals humans had hunted to feed their families, about the wars they had fought to protect their children, about the way human ancestors had tracked dangerous predators for days, never giving up, never stopping until the threat was dead. "We're not explorers anymore," he said quietly. "Came out here thinking we would be diplomats or traders. But we were wrong about what this galaxy needs." The crew looked at him with confusion. Engineer Yang spoke first.
"What do you mean, Captain?"
"Every other species in this galaxy learned to survive by running away, hiding, or working together. But humans learned to survive by becoming very good at killing things that needed to die. We are persistence predators. We don't give up. We don't stop. We don't let threats to our packs survive." He turned to face his crew. "Look at this galaxy. The strong eat the weak. The smart torture the innocent. The advanced species use the primitive ones as food and slaves. But there's one thing missing from this ecosystem." "What's that, sir?" Lieutenant Song asked. "Something that hunts the hunters. Something that makes the predators afraid. Something that protects the innocent by being more dangerous than their enemies." Officer Choi understood first. "You want us to become the thing they fear?" "No," Captain Lee said. "I want us to become the thing they should have feared all along. We're going to send a message to Earth. We're going to tell them what we found, and we're going to ask them to vote on what humanity should do about it." The message was sent within the hour. It contained everything they had seen and learned about the galaxy's major civilizations. It showed the torture chambers, the slave processing centers, the planets drained of life. It contained the screams of the innocent that had been ignored for thousands of years. Earth's response came 3 weeks later. The vote was not even close. Humanity had decided they would not join the galactic community as peaceful traders or curious explorers. They would remake it as guardians and protectors. The message was simple: humanity accepts the role of apex predator. Begin preparations for extended operations. Rules of engagement: protect the innocent, eliminate the guilty, show no mercy to those who show none to others. Captain Lee read the message to his crew. We're going to war. Not for territory or resources or glory. We're going to war because someone has to answer the screams in the darkness. Engineer Yang looked scared, but determined. What do we do first, Captain? Lee looked back at the crystal station where the torture continued. We practice. We learn how to hunt crystal beings. Then we teach the galaxy what happens when something more dangerous than them shows up. The monsters humanity would forge were about to wake up. The alarm systems in the Veltar research station had been screaming. For 3 minutes before they suddenly went silent. The crystal beings working in the neuro-harvesting bay looked up from their work in confusion. Their automated defenses should have eliminated any threat by now. Security. Chief Velkern watched the monitor screens with growing fear. The recordings showed shapes moving through the crystal corridors, but they moved wrong. Too fast, too quiet. The defense systems kept firing at empty air, while the shapes seemed to flow like liquid darkness around every beam of energy. What are those things? Asked one of the researchers, his crystal body flickering with nervous light. Velkern had no answer. In thousands of years, nothing had ever penetrated their station's defenses. Nothing had ever dared to attack them. Major Yoon Hyerim pressed herself against the crystal wall and listened to the footsteps of the patrol moving past her hiding spot. Her black suit made her nearly invisible in the shadows between the glowing walls. She counted 3 crystal beings walking toward the main laboratory. She waited until they were gone, then spoke into her radio. Team Alpha, Corridor 7 is clear. Move to the harvesting bay. Copy that, Major, came the whispered reply. Yoon Hyerim had trained for this mission for 6 months. She had studied every detail of crystal beam technology, learned their weaknesses, practiced moving through their environments. Earth's military had worked day and night to create weapons and equipment that could fight enemies with technology centuries ahead of human science. She reached the main laboratory and saw what made her blood turn cold. Dozens of Cathara were strapped to metal tables. The crystal beings were cutting into their heads while they were still awake, removing pieces of brain tissue. The small, furry creature's large eyes were filled with terror and pain. Target the machines first, she whispered to her team. Save the prisoners. The human soldiers moved like ghosts through the laboratory. Their weapons were designed specifically to shatter crystal structures. Within minutes, every harvesting machine was destroyed. The crystal beings barely had time to understand what was happening before the humans were among them. One crystal being tried to raise an alarm, but Sergeant Kim Taeon was already behind him. The crystal creature shattered into 1,000 pieces before it could make a sound. Yoon Hyerim knelt beside a small Cathara that could barely lift its head. The creature's skull had been partially opened, but it was still alive. She placed her hand gently on its fur and tried to send calming thoughts, the way the training manuals had taught her. We heard your cries, she whispered, hoping the telepathic creature could understand her broken mental communication. Help has come. You are safe now. The Cathora's large eyes filled with something that might have been hope. Similar attacks were happening across the galaxy. Human ships appeared without warning near slave processing centers and research facilities. They struck with precision that scared the major civilizations. The humans only attacked the guilty and left innocent beings untouched. Commander Park Ji-hoon led his team through a luminar energy harvesting station near a dying planet. The energy beings looked like beautiful flames dancing in the air, but Park knew they were draining the life from an entire world below. His team wore special suits that Earth scientists had designed after studying luminary technology for months. The suits not only protected them from the life-draining energy, but they could redirect that energy back at the Lumini themselves. Remember, these things feed on life force, Park told his soldiers through their radio. Our suits turn that hunger against them, move fast and stay together. The Luminar had never been hunted before. had always been the hunters, drifting through space and consuming whatever life they found. But now they faced something that could hurt them. When they tried to drain energy from the humans, their own power was turned against them. They began to burn out like candles in a hurricane. One luminary tried to escape, but Corporal Lee Jayan was waiting. The energy being dissolved into nothing as its own power destroyed it from within. In another sector, the HFY hive mind was experiencing something it had never felt before: fear. Captain Lim Xianwu and his strike team had attacked 3 of their primary nodes with weapons that seemed impossible. The HFY had always won by absorbing other minds into their collective. But when they tried to absorb human thoughts, something went wrong. Human minds were not just resistant to the hive mind, they were poisonous to it. Deploy the neural disruptors, Captain Lim ordered his team as they fought through waves of insect-like HFY soldiers. The weapons, Earth, it created specifically for the hive mind, sent out waves that broke the connections between individual HFY. Suddenly, creatures that had shared one mind for their entire lives found themselves alone and confused. Many of them simply collapsed, unable to function without the collective consciousness. The hive mind itself began to fragment as the neural disruptors spread their effect across entire sectors. For the first time in millions of years, the HFY experienced isolation and individual thought. Most of them could not handle it. The attack spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks. The 3 major civilizations realized they were facing something they had never encountered before: a species that was not afraid of them. A species that hunted the hunters. Human forces struck with surgical precision, targeting only those involved in slavery, torture, and genocide. They left the innocent untouched, but showed no mercy to the guilty. The galaxy's golden age of exploitation was ending. Something had finally answered the cries in the darkness. It was more dangerous than anything the oppressors had ever imagined. The great crystal chamber of the Veltar Council had never seen such chaos. Council leader Velthar stood at the center, his crystalline body flickering with colors that showed his fear and confusion. Around him, other crystal beings spoke in panicked, harmonic voices, their reports getting worse with each passing hour. 17 more facilities have gone dark, reported Velkus, his crystal form dim with exhaustion. The humans appear out of nowhere, destroy everything, free the prisoners, and vanish before our reinforcements arrive. How is this possible? Velthar's voice rang through the chamber like breaking glass. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are made of metal and circuits. We've studied their signals. They are centuries behind us in every way. Another council member, Velanoth, showed images from the latest attack. Look at this footage. The humans move through our walls like they are not solid. Our defense systems cannot track them. They know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. The images showed human soldiers moving through crystal corridors with impossible speed and precision. They cut down the harvesting machines, freed the Cathara prisoners, and disappeared before the automated defenses could respond. It was like watching ghosts fight. They are making us look like fools, Velthar said quietly. For thousands of years, no one has dared to challenge us. Now these primitive mammals are destroying our operations one by one. Meanwhile, in the energy fields of the Luminary Collective, panic was spreading like wildfire. The energy beings communicated through pulses of pure thought, and those pulses now carried something they had never felt before: terror. They hunt us, pulsed one luminary, its energy form flickering with fear. They wear suits that turn our own power against us. When we try to drain their life force, we destroy ourselves instead. The collective had lost 3 entire harvesting operations in the past week. Planets that had been slowly drained of life were now protected by human forces. The energy beings found themselves being hunted by creatures that had studied their weaknesses and created weapons specifically designed to kill them. How do they know so much about us? Pulsed another luminary. We have never shared our secrets with anyone. The answer was simple, but terrifying. The humans had been watching, learning, and preparing. They had studied every broadcast, every energy signature, every piece of technology they could detect, and they had used that knowledge to create weapons that turned the Luminaries' greatest strength into their greatest weakness. In the depths of space, the HFY Overmind was experiencing something it had never felt in millions of years: pain. The hive mind that connected billions of insect-like creatures across dozens of worlds was being torn apart by human weapons. Neural disruptors are spreading, reported one of the HFY drones, before its connection to the overmind was severed. They are cutting us away from each other. I can feel myself becoming alone. The overmind recoiled from the concept. For the HFY, being alone was worse than death. They had existed as a collective consciousness for so long that individual thought was agony. But the human weapons were designed to fragment the hive mind, forcing each HFY to experience isolation and individual consciousness. Whole sectors of the HFY empire were going silent as the neural disruptors spread their effect. The overmind was shrinking, its thoughts becoming confused and desperate. In desperation, the three great civilizations attempted something that had never been done before. They tried to form an alliance. Representatives from all three species met on a neutral station to discuss the human threat. But the humans had been preparing for this moment. As the meeting began, every communication channel in the galaxy was suddenly flooded with sounds that made the representatives freeze in horror. The screams of the innocent. For the first time, in thousands of years, the galaxy was forced to hear the death cries of the enslaved species, the Cathora's telepathic screams of pain, the final thoughts of worlds drained by the Luminare, the last desperate pleas of minds absorbed by the HFY. "Turn it off," demanded the Veltar representative, his crystal form flickering with shame and rage. But the broadcasts continued. Human operatives had infiltrated every communication network in the galaxy. Along with the screams came evidence. Detailed records of atrocities, images of torture chambers, documentation of genocide on an unimaginable scale. The neutral species, who had ignored the suffering for millennia, suddenly found themselves forced to confront the truth. Public opinion across the galaxy began to turn against the three major powers. Then came the human diplomats, ambassador. General Hong Xiaokman stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Senate. He was a small man compared to the massive aliens around him, but his voice carried the authority of an entire species that had declared war on injustice. "You want to know how we are defeating you?" he asked the assembled representatives. "It is simple. You built your civilizations on the suffering of the weak. You ignored their cries for help for thousands of years. You taught the galaxy that might makes right." He paused and looked around the chamber. "But you forgot something important. Forgot that somewhere in the darkness there might be something mightier than you. Something that hears the screams you ignore. Something that hunts the hunters." Ambassador's words echoed through the chamber. "We are not trying to conquer you. We're not trying to rule you. We are simply showing you what happens when apex predators enter an ecosystem where the strong have been preying on the weak without consequences." The galaxy was beginning to understand. The humans had not come as conquerors or diplomats. They had come as something far more dangerous, as justice itself. Given form and purpose and the will to hunt, the massive human fleet hung in space like dark predators surrounding their prey. Three different worlds. Three different civilizations that had ruled the galaxy through fear and cruelty. All about to face humanity's wrath at the same moment. Admiral Nam Yujin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Veltar homeworld spin slowly below. The aliens had built enormous rings around their planet, each one filled with weapons and shields. For centuries, these rings had protected the Veltar while they enslaved weaker species. Today those rings would fall. "Begin the attack," Yujin ordered quietly. Human ships moved like ghosts through space. It learned to hide from the Veltar sensors, to slip past their defenses like shadows. The first explosions lit up the orbital rings before the Veltar even knew they were under attack. Metal twisted and burned as humanity's weapons tore through structures that had stood for 1,000 years. On the planet's surface, Colonel Shindaeon led her soldiers through the crystal cities. The Veltar built everything from special crystals that gave them power. These crystals were also their weakness. Daeon's teams planted bombs with surgical precision, destroying the main crystal networks that kept Veltar civilization running. "Crystal Matrix 7 is down," reported one of her sergeants. The whole sector's going dark. Dan nodded grimly. She felt no joy in this destruction, but she remembered the screams of the Cathara children, the broken bodies of the Zelani workers. The Veltar had shown no mercy to the weak. They would receive none in return. Far across the galaxy, the Luminari faced a different kind of terror. These beings were made of pure energy, flowing through space and controlling matter with their thoughts. They believed themselves gods, untouchable by physical weapons. They were wrong. Human scientists had studied the Luminari for months, learning their secrets. They discovered that the energy beings needed certain conditions to exist. Change those conditions, and the Luminari simply faded away. Captain Ominsiok watched from his command ship as human devices activated across the Luminari space. Dark zones spread like ink through water, areas where the Luminari consciousness couldn't survive. The energy beings tried to flee, but everywhere they went, the darkness followed. "They're breaking apart," his science officer reported. "The collective consciousness is fragmenting." The third target was perhaps the most dangerous, the Kithwa. Overmind controlled billions of bodies across hundreds of worlds. Every Kethva was connected to every other through neural networks that spanned space itself. They moved as one, thought as one, killed as one. But humanity had found the central relays, the key points that held the vast network together. Special teams hit these targets simultaneously, cutting the connections that made the Overmind possible. Without their unified consciousness, the Kethva became confused, lost. No longer the terrifying force they had been. Within hours, 3 galactic empires lay in ruins. The oppressors who had ruled through fear and violence were broken. Their power scattered to the stars, but humanity didn't claim the empty thrones. They didn't build new empires on the bones of the old ones. Instead, they made a simple announcement that reached every corner of the galaxy. The message was clear. The strong would protect the weak, or face the consequences. Fleet Admiral Lee, Wan promoted after the Great Victory, met with representatives of the liberated species on what had once been the Veltar capital. The aliens came slowly, afraid to believe that their nightmare was truly over. A Cathara elder approached Lee, her thoughts forming words in the universal translator. "Why did you fight for strangers you had never met?" Lee looked at the scarred alien, thinking of all the species that had suffered under galactic tyranny. His answer was broadcast across every world, every station, every ship in known space. "Because we heard you screaming, and where we come from, when someone cries for help in the darkness, the monsters that answer aren't always the ones you should fear. Sometimes they're the ones you need." The word spread like fire through the galaxy. The weak and oppressed wept with joy and relief. They had protectors now, guardians who would stand between them and those who would harm them. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly healed. The freed species began to call humans the shepherds. Protectors who watched over the innocent like shepherds guarding their flocks from wolves. But the former oppressors used different names when they whispered in the dark corners of space. They called humans the pack, remembering how human ships had hunted them like wolves. They called them the hunters, thinking of how humanity had stalked them across the stars. Some called them the silence between stars, for they came without warning and left only justice in their wake. The galaxy had learned a new truth. Humanity would not rule, but they would watch. They would not conquer, but they would protect. And those who forgot this lesson would face the same fate as the Veltar, the Luminari, and the Kethva in the darkness between stars. Humanity waited and watched, ready to answer the next cry for help.